Hello everyone and welcome back to the video. Today's video is a bit of an interesting one. Y'all all know that photo where there's 9 groups of animals, you gotta pick 2 to defend you, and the other 7 are coming at you. Well, that's what we're gonna be doing in today's video, but with the Smash Ultimate roster. I have in front of me the first official Smash Ultimate tier list, and we can all agree that this list is not without flaws, but I do think it's the best metric that we can go off of, and I'm gonna be picking 2 characters from every single tier that I think have the best matchup spread to defend me from the rest of the cast. This is just a hypothetical, so the exact numbers don't super matter, but I want y'all to be on the same footing as me. Let's say we are doing a crew battle. It is my 10 characters versus the rest of the cast. If you have the rest of the cast 3 stocks, that is a combined 216 stocks to my 30 stocks, and that doesn't seem super fair to me, so I'm going to be giving all of my characters 15 stocks. Why 15? No real reason, just kind of an arbitrary number, but now I have 150 stocks, and that's a little bit more fair, but we got to make up for that 60 stock deficit, and the way I'm going to be doing that is I'm allowing myself to counterpick the opponent. So just picking random characters here. Let's say they send in Yoshi, I send in Fox. My Fox is able to take all 3 Yoshi stocks while only losing 2. My Fox now has 13 stocks, and now they want to send in a really bad matchup for Fox, like Pichu, for example. I don't have to stay on Fox. I can switch into a better matchup against Pichu, like Game & Watch, and that's how the crew battle is going to work. I get to counterpick. The stock losses are still the same, and overall I have less stocks, but it allows me to use my top tiers in the situations where they're good and have very specific counterpicks for my low tiers. Now, if you're a little bit confused, don't worry. You're probably not the only person who shares that sentiment. And as we get further on in the video and my roster fleshes out, things are going to make more and more sense. And starting off with the D tier, we are picking characters in this tier for very specific matchups. None of the characters in the D tier are going to have a good general matchup spread, so we want them to take out 1 or 2 top tiers that our other characters may be struggling with. Let's say we pick Steve, for example, as one of our characters in the S tier. What's a bad matchup for Steve? Well, he struggles a little bit against Cloud. We want to pick a character in the D tier that is able to deal with Cloud. So Steve, a really good character with a nice matchup spread, doesn't have to worry about that. And my 2 characters that I'm going to be picking from the D tier are going to be Kirby and me Sword Fighter. The reason that I'm going to be picking me Sword Fighter is because he has the best matchup out of any of the characters in the D tier versus Game & Watch, and it's not even a particularly insane matchup for me Sword Fighter. I would say it's probably even maybe slight Sword Fighter favor, but I would lean towards even because Game & Watch is kind of broken, but that's better than the rest of the characters in the D tier, and as we get further on in the video, you're going to realize that a Game & Watch counter is very important for us, so that's pretty much the only reason I'm picking up Sword Fighter. And our other D tier character is going to be Kirby, and his matchup spread is a little bit better than me Sword Fighters, in my opinion. He's going to be doing pretty well versus all of the FGC characters. Zero Suit can struggle with him sometimes, but the main reason that we're going to be picking Kirby is because he actually has a really good matchup versus Fox. And by really good, I mean it's probably like a 0.5 in Kirby's favor, but still, we take that because Fox is going to be a struggle character for one very specific character later on in the video, and I want Kirby to take him out for me. Next up, you're going to have the C tier, and my 2 characters from this tier are going to be Lucario and Duck Hunt. Now, as I've already mentioned, generally when we're picking characters from the lower tier, we're picking them because they have 1 or 2 specific matchups where they do very well in, and our top tier characters may not do super well in those matchups, so we can send in the low tiers to kind of clean up those matchups so our top tier can deal with the rest of the cast. I'm not picking Lucario for that reason. And he does have a couple solid matchups versus some top tiers. I think he does well versus Bayonetta and Pac-Man. He does pretty good versus Samus Diddy Kong, but that's not why we're picking him. We're picking him because Aura in this context is incredibly scary. I'm very low on Lucario in the tournament setting just because you have to play so many matches in a row and you're just bound to get a set or a character where you're just dying super early and you can't get the maximum usage out of your Aura. In this context, the only character that's going to pretty much guarantee you don't see Aura is going to be Kazuya if the Kazuya player is good, but even against a Snake, a Steve, a Roy, characters with amazing killing, you're probably still going to get Aura at some point, and even in the bad matchups, Max or Lucario is just so scary, and he's the only character in the C tier that I feel like that, aside from Incineroar. It was between Incineroar and Lucario for this slot. I ended up going with Lucario just because I value Aura a little bit more than I value Revenge, but also Incineroar is definitely a better character in tournament. I just like Lucario better. Our C tier character is going to be Duck Hunt, and this one is a little bit more orthodox than Lucario, and Duck Hunt has some pretty good matches versus a lot of the top tiers in this game. I think Duck Hunt is pretty good into Samus. Duck Hunt Diddy Kong is one of Diddy's worst matchups, if not Diddy's worst matchup. I think Duck Hunt does good versus Bayonetta, all of the FGC characters, and all the Duck Hunt charts that I've seen have Steve in the winning tier. Now, I do not agree with this, but I can't deny that Duck Hunt has some good tools to be able to deal with Steve. You have some very low risk ways to be able to get Steve out of minecart to stop him from mining, and that's going to be with Can, of course. It's just a way to be able to contest Steve shenanigans without really putting yourself in danger, and obviously you got to give Duck Hunt points for that, but I still don't think it's a necessarily winning match for the character. I would probably have it in the even or slightly winning for Steve, but the fact that we have a character in the C tier that potentially beats Steve is good enough for me. Moving on to the B tier, and this is where we're getting a little bit less concerned about very specific matchups and more concerned about broader matchup charts. And I'm not gonna lie, we get to do a little bit of cheating in the B tier because my two choices are going to be Corrin and Bayonetta. These are two characters that are definitely not B tier. I would have Bayonetta in the S tier, borderline top 10. I think very highly of this character. And I would have Corrin somewhere in the A tier, probably towards the higher part of the A tier, though they are without a doubt not B tier characters, but they're in the B tier for this ranking, so I get to use them. The reason that I picked Bayonetta is fairly self-explanatory. This character is just really broken and definitely not in the B tier, but we're cheating, so whatever. And there's also a couple matchups that we get to take out with Bayonetta that I heavily value. Rob, for example, I think Bayo destroys Rob, so that's a nice matchup to get out of the way. I think Bayonetta is pretty good versus all the FGC characters, though we do have a lot of counters for the FGC characters already. They're just really scary characters, so it's always nice to have more. I think she does pretty good versus Sheik, and versus Game & Watch, I would say that Bayonetta Game & Watch is probably an even matchup, but this character is definitely able to exploit Game & Watch and kill him incredibly early, which is massive. I also think that Bayonetta goes even versus very important characters like Steve, Min Min, Roy, Cloud, for example. She just has a lot of matchups where she's either winning or going even in, which I think is super important. And she does have a couple struggle matches, but nothing that our other characters can't count. And our other B tier character is going to be Corrin. And like Bayonetta, this one is a little bit of a cheat. But what can I say? I didn't make the tier list, so you can't really get mad at me. And I'm really quickly going to throw up a Corrin matchup chart on screen. This one here is from Shattuck. And I want y'all to look at the losing tier. And we already have a lot of counters for these characters. You look at Fox and Zero Suit, for example. Kirby is a great choice into those characters. Duck Hunt does super well versus Samus. And we haven't even gotten to the higher end of the cast. And we already have a lot of solutions for Corrin's bad matchups. That is crucial. That is exactly what we need our low tier characters from, and we haven't even gotten to the top tiers, and they're already getting value in theory. And also, Corrin's matchup spread is just really solid. She's going to be winning versus Rob, versus Wolf, versus Steve, which is very important. She's going at least even with Game & Watch, with Sonic, with Aegis, and she just has an amazing matchup spread, and our low tier characters complement her extremely well. We've arrived at the A tier, and from this point on, we're going to be picking characters based off how good their general matchup spread is. It's going to be less about picking them for very specific matchups, and we were kind of already doing that with the B tier because our characters were like A tier, S tier caliber, but now we're officially going to be doing it, and my two characters are going to be Lucina and Yoshi. And I want to give an honorable mention to Sora because that character is ridiculously broken, but his matchup spread isn't as good, in my opinion, as well as some of the top tiers that he does super well versus. I don't value as highly as some of the top tiers that Lucina and Yoshi do super well against. So our first character in the A tier is going to be Lucina, and the deciding factor of why I chose Lucina over Sora is going to be for a very specific matchup, and that's going to be versus Snake. I think Lucina does very well versus Snake. I don't think it's unwinnable for Snake by any means, because nothing is really unwinnable for that character if you play correctly, but she's just able to bully him in the disadvantage state so hard, and you don't have to worry about trade too much with Grenade if you're spacing well, and you should be spacing well. That's why you're playing Lucina, and the disadvantage state is just abysmal for Snake. It's very difficult for him to get down, and I give Lucina massive points for that because Snake is a character that you need to be able to deal with. And also, she just has a very solid matchup spread. She doesn't have any struggle matchup that we don't already have solutions for, aside from maybe Joker, but we'll get to him in just a second. And she just goes even or wins versus a lot of relevant characters in this game, which is important. And our other A tier character is going to be Yoshi, and this one's very simple. I'm not picking him for any specific reasons. His matchup spread is just really solid. He's going even or winning with a majority of characters in this game, and we need characters that are able to take out the fodder. We need someone that can deal with the bottom 40 half of the cast, and that's where I think Yoshi and Lucina are going to shine. We send them in versus the mid tiers, versus the low tiers, and they're just absolutely going to sweep house, and Yoshi is literally perfect for that criteria. And in terms of struggle matchups, I think his worst matchup by far, maybe not by far, but I think his worst matchup is probably Samus, and we already have solutions for Samus in our low tier character, so Yoshi not only gets complemented super well by the characters that we've already chosen, but he's just amazing at clearing out some of that fodder. Editing fruit block here, I forgot an honorable mention alongside Sora, and that is going to be Terry. Like Yoshi, I think he has a very solid match spread, and he does really well versus a lot of the fodder characters. I just think Yoshi and Lucina do a little bit of a better job. We are now at the final tier, the S tier, and this was the hardest tier for me to choose from because not only are they the most just broken characters to choose from here, but if we don't pick a certain character, that means that we're going to have to play versus them. When you have characters like Game & Watch, Steve, Kazuya, Game & Watch, Sonic, Rob, Game & Watch, Snake, Pikachu, Game & Watch, there's just so many difficult choices that you have to make, and I have managed to boil it down to two because obviously you're watching the video, and the two characters that I ended up going with are Sonic, no real surprise there, and Pikachu. I'll go over Sonic first because I think he's fairly self-explanatory, but Sonic just doesn't really lose matches. He has the best matchup chart in the game, and that is including Steve in the conversation. And I know a lot of you are probably surprised that I didn't pick Steve, but when we look at a Steve matchup chart, at least characters that he loses to, in my opinion, I think he loses to Cloud, even if it's not by a significant amount. I think he gets kind of destroyed by Sonic. I think he loses to Zero Suit. I think he loses to Pokemon Trainer. There's a couple other characters that I could see him losing to, whereas Sonic, the only character in the game that I could maybe see him losing to is Fox, and that's why we chose Kirby at the start of the video, but there are no other characters in this game that I think Sonic loses to. I could see him going even with a handful of characters, but losing is almost out of the question for me. I'm sure a lot of you are a little bit confused that I didn't just go with Steve Sonic, and I don't think that's a bad combination by any means, but I think Pikachu's matchup spread is a little bit better, and the characters that we've chosen from also complement him better. You look at the characters that Pikachu is actually going to be losing to, I think he definitely loses to Game & Watch, he probably loses to Pac-Man and Ness, maybe he loses to Mario, but I'm honestly not convinced on that, so I just want to stick to that main three. And for Game & Watch, we have characters like Lucina, we have characters like Yoshi. They're at least going to go even with Game & Watch. You also have some of our fodder characters like Mii Swordfighter, for example, having a pretty good matchup versus Game & Watch. And Pac-Man is another character that Mii Swordfighter actually did pretty well versus, and I think Duck Hunt has some tools in that matchup. I don't know if Duck Hunt necessarily wins that matchup, but it's probably at worst a minus 0.5 for the character. And when you have 15 stocks and you're one of our low tier characters, it's okay if you're giving up 5 or 6 stocks on one character because it allows Pikachu to be able to get rid of his bad matchups, and Mii Swordfighter is able to do that for both Game & Watch and Pac-Man. And for Ness, we have Lucina, and Lucina Ness is arguably Ness's worst matchup, so I'm not too worried about that. Our roster perfectly complements Pikachu, and he just owns the rest of the cast. So there you have it. The 10 characters that I think would defend me the best from the rest of the Smash Ultimate roster would be Mii Swordfighter and Kirby in the D tier, Lucario and Duck Hunt in the C tier, Corrin and Bayonetta in the B tier, Yoshi and Lucina in the A tier, and Sonic Pikachu in the S tier. And with that, I thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I'm very curious what y'all think about this video and what would your roster look like, because there are so many different ways that you can do this depending on who you're picking in the S tier. Your D tier and C tier characters are going to be completely different because you're going to be countering for different matchups, and I just want to see how creative y'all are going to get. If there's anything I got wrong, anything I disagree with, or if you just want to say hi, leave a comment down below. Be sure to sub while you're down there, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye bye.